Hello, everyone, and welcome to the first episode of the Mitten Kittens book club, where we explore meow-der and mayhem one book at a time. This podcast, or book club, you could say, was kind of an idea that I had swirling around in my brain because I love true crime, along with a mix of fictitious crime. I can't tell you how many times I've binge watched all seasons of Law and Order over and over again. I'm pretty sure my neighbors hate me because they're tired of hearing the dun dun over and over again. And the other part, of course, if you know me, I am a crazy cat lady. My apartment is fully decorated with everything kitty cat. There's not one corner in my apartment that doesn't have anything to do with my cats. It's a pretty deeply ingrained passion of mine. So I decided, well, the best way to make this podcast really interesting and really fun for me is just to combine both of my loves. Thus, Mitten Kittens Book Club was founded. I also want to give a shout out to my biggest fan, even though this podcast wasn't even born yet. Hi, Pasito. I know you're probably listening and you're really, really excited. So I just wanted to give you a little shout out and tell you that I love you. So let's get into it. Today's episode dives into deception, identity theft, calculated manipulation, and murder in a book called First Lie Wins. Let's sharpen those claws because this story is slick, calculated, and emotionally ruthless, and I loved every page of this book. Although I do have to provide a warning. Listener discretion is advised. This episode discusses homicide, staged deaths, psychological coercion, stalking, identity, erasure, and manipulation. I will not sanitize or minimize the violence or criminal acts depicted in this novel. So if any of those items trigger you, feel free to skip this episode. I understand it's not for everyone. Just stop on by for the next one. And of course, another warning, full spoilers ahead. So if you intend to read this novel on your own and you don't want to know exactly what happens and how it ends, feel free to also skip this podcast. No worries here. So this book was written by Ashley Elston. Ashley Elston delivers a sleek, high-stakes thriller centered around identity and survival. First Lie Wins was published in January of 2024, and the novel quickly gained traction for its morally gray anti-hero, you could say, and layered structure that reveals its truths in strategic fragments that leaves you on that cliffhanger and wanting to know what happens next. And it quickly became a #1 New York Times bestseller. And I can see why, because I could not put this book down myself. For longtime readers of Ashley Elston, this book marks something super special. She's known for her young adult thrillers, but First Lie Wins is her adult fictional debut. And she transitions into this new space so smoothly. You'd think she had been writing psychological thrillers in the adult fiction area her whole career. And she has definitely captivated my interest just from reading this book alone. Now, this book isn't just a whodunit. It's a who am I really? And how far would I go to survive? If you've ever reinvented yourself after a bad breakup or after a heinous haircut, Evie, our main character, did just that, but unfortunately, it was with crimes. Elston is known for character-driven suspense, with strong female leads navigating dangerous moral territory. In First Lie Wins, she crafts a protagonist who is both predator and prey. The novel leans into psychological suspense rather than the gratuitous gore, which I personally like both types of versions, but this book was written so well, you did not need any of that. The crimes in this book are deliberate, calculated, and chilling in their precision. The structure alternates between past assignments and present danger, building tension as we realize that our narrator has survived previous death scenarios and may not survive this one. All right, so now that the stage is set, let's meet the people playing this very dangerous game. Our main character is named Evie Porter, but we find out that her real name is Luca Moreno. Evie is a manufactured identity. Her handler, Mr. Smith, places her into towns under false names to infiltrate and dismantle men's lives for financial or strategic gain. Evie is intelligent, she is observant, and emotionally compartmentalized. She has committed crimes including fraud, identity theft, and complicity in deaths tied to some of her assignments. Yikes. Psychologically, Evie survives by detachment. She tells herself she's playing a role, but as the story unfolds, we start to see the cracks in her armor. Next, we have Mr. Smith, a shadowy orchestrator who recruits vulnerable women and erases their past. He uses surveillance, financial control, and implied threats to keep Evie compliant, as well as his other undercover assets. Though rarely physically violent on the page, his psychological domination over all of his quote-unquote employees is absolutely chilling. He has orchestrated crimes that result in financial ruin and even death. The next player is Ryan Sumner, Evie's current target. A wealthy, well-liked man in a quiet Louisiana town. Unlike previous marks, Ryan is kind and emotionally open. As Evie embeds herself into his life, the con becomes really, really complicated. If she follows orders, Ryan could lose everything, possibly even his life. Next, we have Amy and Devin. Amy and Devin are fellow operatives and proof that identity does not have to be permanently erased. Their loyalty to each other and to Evie becomes the emotional counterweight to Mr. Smith's control. They represent chosen identity rather than assigned identity. Next, we have Victor Connolly, a powerful figure and head of Mr. Smith's operation. Mr. Smith's double cross of the Connolly family reveals that Mr. Smith is just a greedy, power-hungry character. His betrayal is the domino that topples the entire operation. And although the Connolly family is not a center, really important part of the story, there's not a lot of scenes you can say with this guy. He is one of the most important characters in how the story plays out. It's pretty interesting. And next, we have the imposter character that shows up and introduces herself as none other than Luca Moreno. When another woman appears using Evie's real name, it is a psychological warfare. Replacement is imminent. Identity theft becomes identity assassination. And that is only the start to this crazy downfall. Okay, kittens, let's tear this plot wide open. So, what is First Lie Wins about? Evie arrives in a town with a fully constructed identity. And I am talking social security numbers, fake memories of where you went to school and who you were friends with before. It's almost like the illegal version of witness protection program. And it is insane the amount of money and power Mr. Smith has to provide these fake identities. for all of his assets. Evie begins to integrate herself into Ryan's world. She begins to date him, befriending his social circle, and starts to map out his routines. Her assignment is to gather information that will ultimately destroy him. We learn through flashbacks that Evie has previously taken down other men. In one case, her involvement contributed to a target's suicide, and it wasn't good, after financial ruin and devastation. Yikes. The psychological weight of that death lingers. Even if she refuses to name it as guilt, it still weighs heavily on her. As Evie builds real feelings for Ryan, she discovers inconsistencies in her assignment. Another woman appears in town using Evie's real name, Luca Moreno. This is the ultimate warning. Mr. Smith replaces assets when they grow unreliable. Evie realizes that she may be the next loose end Mr. Smith has to tie up. And it gets real after that, folks. The suspense escalates as she uncovers the depth of Mr. Smith's surveillance. Hidden cameras, financial traps, backup identities prepared. As Abby Lee Miller from Dance Moms once said, everyone is replaceable. And lucky enough, Mr. Smith has the money, connections, and power to make that happen at the drop of a hat. And here's the key reveal. Everyone, grab your emotional support kitties. This is where the book really gets deliciously clever. The mission Evie supposedly failed was never truly a failure. It was an elaborate strategic maneuver within a larger plan. Evie was supposed to hit another mark, Amy Holder, and take back all the incriminating evidence she had on Mr. Smith that would indeed expose him and his double crossing of one of the most powerful and wealthy families. The double crossing of Victor Connolly exposes Mr. Smith's greed, and that miscalculation allowed Evie, Amy, and Devin to change the game. Instead of running, they take over. They seize Mr. Smith's surveillance network, finances, and operational structure, and turn it over to Victor, who ultimately takes care of the problem, if you know what I mean. The hunter becomes the hunted. The man who had erased identities lost his own, along with his life. And while this novel is not graphically gory, the violence is systemic. Reputations destroyed, lives dismantled, psychological torture inflicted throughout manipulation and coercion. The ending leaves us with a sense of reclaimed identity and women who choose autonomy over obedience, all wrapped up in a nice little bow. All right, so now let's dip our little toe beans into some literary analysis that I found fascinating throughout this novel. First off, we've got a classic unreliable narrator. And she's not just a little unreliable. Her whole life is built on lies that change with every operation she's working on. That means for us as readers, we're constantly trying to figure out what's real, what's performance, and what's strategically left out. The fun is that we're in her head, but she's not exactly giving us the full picture. And we only learn and believe what she wants us to. And this creates that delicious feeling of tension and doubt as the story begins to unfold. The novel also focuses on this idea of identity as a moving target. Evie's constant self-reinvention demonstrates how trauma reshapes selfhood. Identity is wearable, disposable, and transactional. Mirrors, rehearsals, and clothing reinforce the idea that identity is a performance. Evie treats identity like costume changes. Mirrors reoccur throughout the book as she studies her face, her posture, even her smile. Identity becomes muscle memory and a moving target that constantly evolves. The horrifying realization is that the real Luca Moreno is barely accessible anymore. Survival requires adaptability, not authenticity. And I found this absolutely so intriguing because when you think about it, if you're assigned to all of these different missions and you have to talk to all of these different people, you're constantly trying to almost reinvent yourself, how you talk, how you even walk, how you carry yourself, how you present yourself to be able to accomplish whatever mission you are assigned to. And in my mind, that just seems so exhausting. Like, that's a lot to keep up with. Like, I can barely keep up with just like the normal day-to-day things, but if I had to focus and remember was my best friend in like first grade, but really isn't my own memory, but a memory that was created for this false identity, it just seems so mentally exhausting. But I thought that was a really interesting concept in this book. This book also kind of talks about a lot of power and control with Mr. Smith and his operations, because Mr. Smith never needed a weapon and he never needed to actually go and physically kill someone himself. The surveillance and information that he gathered throughout whatever mark he was following function as psychological violence. He is almost like this omniscient being, knowing and seeing everything that is going on around his assets and knows their every move without ever being present, or so we thought. Another thing I truly enjoyed in this novel was its structure and foreshadowing. The non-linear timeline mirrors this fractured identity that Evie is constantly having a battle with throughout the whole novel. Early mentions of replacements foreshadow Evie's near erasure. It also provides this juicy tension that builds with each chapter. Just as soon as you are about to get to an action-packed moment in the book, you're interrupted by a flashback. This style of writing surely kept my wheels spinning and had me on the hook for more. But I also kind of felt like I was on one of those spinning teacup rides at the fair, and I was just trying to focus on one point, and then all of a sudden I'm whisked away and focusing on another one in the best way possible. Or I guess you could say a spinning top. You were just completely off balance the whole time until the very end. There's also this big theme of moral ambiguity throughout this book that I really enjoyed. No one in this book is fully good or fully evil, you could say. They're all kind of operating in these multiple shades of gray. And you end up rooting for someone who does questionable things. And the book does a great job making you understand why. It makes everything feel more layered and human. Like, for instance, I found myself rooting for Evie because she was going to take down Mr. Smith's operation because he had been not only abusing his power, but also offing his assets, even though they didn't deserve it. Rooting for Evie was like, I felt like I was on a teeter-totter. I wanted her to take down this ring and I wanted her to do it for good. But of course, in the end, we figure out that her, Amy, and Devin all did it so they could actually take over his operations. And of course, in the end, we don't really know what their operations are going to be, if they're going to be the Robin Hoods of these criminal operations, I guess you could say. We can only infer by the way the book ends and leaves you off with this idea that they're going to continue Mr. Smith's operation, but maybe with less ultimate control, like Mr. Smith was. Once he got tired or bored of an asset, he just got rid of them. In the end, I guess you could say I was rooting for them, even though they did do a lot of, like, shady stuff. But, I mean, you can't really blame Evie either, because she didn't fall into this life of crime because she wanted to be a criminal or was just this overall bad person. She fell into this lifestyle because in the beginning of the book, it mentions that her mom got really sick and ended up with cancer, and they were kind of down and out, and it's just her and her mom living in this really small trailer, and Evie needed to do anything she could to help pay for her mother's treatments. So that's kind of how she fell into this, world of con artistry, you could say. But her mom did end up passing away, and she did continue this lifestyle, ultimately because she literally has no one left, and also the money was something she couldn't really turn down. So what I also found fascinating, or always find fascinating, is why the book is titled what it is, why it's called that. Was it just called that because the author felt like it, or is there a deeper meaning? And in my little noggin, I thought First Lie Wins was a perfect title for this type of book. To me, First Lie Wins suggests that whoever controls the narrative controls reality. They're controlling the game. Evie's first lie trapped her into this crazy, crazy whirlwind life of con artistry. But her final strategic lie ended up freeing her and overtaking Mr. Smith's operation. So I thought that was pretty fascinating and a nice little extra literary element that authors kind of give to their audience. All right, and so we come to the end of this analysis, and I have 4 questions that I kind of came up with at the end of this story. The first one being, is identity something we own or perform? I believe it can be both. You're kind of forming your own identity as you evolve through life. And I also believe it can also be a performance, because you can also try and change your identity to fit into a certain culture or get along with, the cool kids, the jocks, anybody like that. Then it becomes more of a performance rather than who you really are. And like I discussed earlier, if taking over Mr. Smith's operation, does it really absolve Evie of all of her past crimes? I don't know. I'm kind of on the fence about it, because learning more and more throughout the book about what Mr. Smith has done and how heinous he was towards his assets, and that he believed that everybody was replaceable, seems like such a powerful and controlling way to, control his con artists, I guess. But I don't know. I don't see Evie and her team falling into that mindset of being so controlling and evil, but we can only infer at this point. So I think I'm about 50-50. It kind of made up for all of the things she did, but it doesn't erase it. So I'd say I'm about 50-50 on that one. And since this book focused mostly on psychological harm, do you think psychological harm is as violent as physical violence? Again, it kind of depends. Psychological harm can do a lot to a person, and it can drive a person to do horrible things like kill or torture other people. But also, of course, there's the physical aspect of it. Like, it's going to hurt. You can call someone a name. That's going to hurt them psychologically, but if you slap them, it's gonna hurt them physically and it's gonna leave a physical mark. So I don't know. I think obviously the physical violence is a little more intense, but the psychological harm could be something that lasts forever because it could really, really mess up someone's psyche. And my own thought-provoking question, would you have burned the system down or would you have taken it over? Again, it's kind of that dual-edged sword. If you do decide to continue your life outside of this whole operation, you're kind of stuck in this invented identity from the last mission that you had accomplished. And it's almost like that person doesn't really exist. They were created in this world of con artistry. So how are you ever going to continue your life or get a job when your identity is someone that's fictitious? But then on the other side, if you do take it over, it seems like you could continue your own life and get all this money and be somewhat successful, but then you're going to run into a lot of problems with maybe your own assets, or maybe someone wants to overthrow the business and take over, and then you're stuck trying to, protect this con artistry business and keep it going without, being taken over by one of your own assets, or maybe there's another ring of con artists and that boss wants you off their turf. So there's so many things that could go wrong in both scenarios, but I don't know, if I had to choose one, I think I would just continue as this fictitious person and try and live my life in the shadows. Whew, that was a lot to get through, and I'm so glad we got through it. But now it's time for our Claw and Order segment, where I try and pull something from this fictional novel and relate it to some sort of true crime that happened somewhere in the US. So I wanted to bring up a fun little true crime event that relates to one of the missions in the book. Like I said, Evie, at one point, was put to the test against several of Mr. Smith's other employees to recover an original Van Gogh flower painting. This reminded me of a case that took place back one day after Thanksgiving in 1985, when a man and woman had entered the University of Arizona's museum right when it had opened. It was said that the woman made small talk with the staff while her partner went upstairs to steal William de Kooning's Woman Ochre, an oil painting that was completed in 1955 and was donated to the museum in 1958. De Kooning was a Dutch-American abstract expressionist known for his vibrant works of art. The FBI had a little to go on besides 2 sketches of the man and the woman and an eyewitness account of a rust-colored sports car leaving the scene. They weren't certain if that was even related or not. That was just something that was pointed out by somebody. It wasn't until David Van Acker, I believe, is how you pronounce his last name, Buck Burns and Rick Johnson, owners of an antique store in Silver City, had accidentally stumbled upon the painting. They had acquired a deceased woman's estate in which they found the painting hanging in an inconspicuous spot behind one of the bedroom doors. The shop owners, obviously not professionally trained in spotting real artwork, had taken the painting back to their store and immediately caught the attention of art lovers who began to question the owners if it was a real de Kooning. It garnered so much attention that Acker Googled de Kooning and came across the 2015 Arizona Republic's article on the 30th year anniversary of the art theft. How wild is that? They immediately reached out to the University of Arizona and brought back the painting. Unfortunately, the painting had sustained significant damage from being crudely cut from its original canvas. The University of Arizona sent the painting off to the Getty in 2019, where Laura Rivers began her tedious job of restoration. After days and days of restoration, the painting was finally complete and was sent back to the university with an entourage of police escorts and even Homeland Security officers to ensure the safe return of the painting, estimated to be worth anywhere between $100 to $160 million. That is insane. The painting was uncrated on September 19th, 2022, and is finally back on display where it belongs. Sadly, the thieves were never caught. It is said that when the painting was donated, it was only worth about $6,000 in 1958. In 1985, the value had skyrocketed. It was part of de Kooning's Women series, which was a pivotal work in abstract expressionism and had gained so much popularity, which is why its overall value started to skyrocket. All right, so that wraps up today's descent into deception. Thank you so much for spending time with me and listening to my very first podcast. I have a newfound appreciation of all my fellow podcasters because this project took an insane amount of editing and an insane amount of time to complete. Like any other art project, of course, you have to have the skill, and when you're learning from ground zero, you can only go up. So I have just a whole new appreciation for anyone in the audiovisual world because it is so different to me. I'm used to still photography and graphic design in the Adobe suite. I've never used any of the audio recordings, so I'm learning as I'm continuing to record these podcasts. And also, I've never realized how many times I actually breathe when I talk. When I was listening back to this recording, I think I had to delete maybe like over 300 times where I would just like take a breath in between my sentences. And obviously it's a learning curve and I have to learn how to speak in a sense on an actual recording. And probably that also comes with like nerves along with, yes, this is my very first one. So of course I'm always going to try so hard and get so far. And you know, it's only up from here. And I'm still so thankful that you were here with me today, listening to my very first podcast. Hopefully it is, you know, not as rough as I think it is because you're your own worst critic. But I can't wait to dive into all of my other ideas to add to this podcast as well. So I hope you all stay tuned and you enjoyed my own interpretation of all of these books that I have been reading. Don't forget to like, follow, and share for more episodes. Not only am I going to do these longer episode formats, I also have in the works some shorter episodes as well, and those are going to be part of my mini mitten series where I will discuss a book that maybe isn't as long as the novels that I have been reading at the moment, or they're books that are a little more on the disturbing side and I don't feel like talking about all of the heinous crimes that were committed in the book, or you know, just not having to relive the extreme horror that I already had to go through when I was reading the book the first time. So keep your eye out for those short, concise, bite-sized episodes. And I also wanted to wrap up this episode with one of the sound bites that my microphone actually did capture of my cats having a full MMA fight in the background. It's a really short clip, but I thought it was really too funny not to share. Until next time, stay curious, stay cautious, and remember, in this world, the first lie wins. See you next time.